So if I can be honest with you for a moment, I've been struggling with my mental health. Everyone struggles with their mental health. Everyone struggles mental with their health. I want to see if gaming can change that. If you are experiencing ADHD, depression, racing thoughts that just won't shut up every single moment of the day, I'm hoping this episode might help. I'm Haz, and today we're cozying down for a nice little conversation with Hazel, who you may know from TikTok, steam training her way through the algorithm to anyone who needs a little bit of a mental boost. And as I was typing your email, I was like, oh, we're both called Haz. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I know, me too.
Welcome to the show. So how did you get started? So obviously you're making a game. You've got some absolutely amazing mental health content going out on TikTok. Where does this synergy come from?
My background's in sport.
Okay.
I was a kickboxer and boxer competing for 10 years on the international circuit. During that time, I just burnt out absolutely horribly, hit rock bottom, both physically and emotionally. And at that point, I was so completely unaware of anything. I was totally disconnected from my body. I didn't understand what my emotions were. I was having panic attacks and I just thought I was ill.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, I just pushed myself further and further into this burnout without actually ever really stopping to ask what was really going on. Eventually, I was forced to go to therapy after trying so many different types of therapy and so many medical routes to try and find the quick fix for my body and get back in the ring.
What's the pill that's going to fix it? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Who's the person with the magic wand? And I would get genuinely angry with people if they couldn't do it. You know, like it was so messed up. And eventually, I had to concede that, you know, obviously this was going to take some work, and I needed to look at my mental and emotional state. Found a therapist that really worked for me. It was a very creative style of therapy, a very creative therapist. And it totally changed my life. And first of all, it got me back into the ring. It got me back to health. It didn't get me back to 100% fitness. I mean, I really had battered my body. I was also older, but it got me back to enough health to compete again. You know, I won some good titles that I was proud of, that I was able to be proud of for the first time. But eventually, it actually just meant that I didn't need to box anymore. I kind of realised I didn't want to be hitting the people in the face anymore.
Right, okay.
I didn't feel I had something to prove in the same way that I had done when I'd gone into fighting.
Sorry to interrupt, but had you seen that as in, like, was that almost a coping mechanism in itself then?
The fighting, definitely.
Yeah.
And the therapy helped me to see that. It helped me to recognise both why I put so much stress on winning and why it was so painful for me to lose, which was what, of course, caused the burnout, because I was just constantly anxious about it. And it helped me to understand, you know, beyond that, where those values and preferences had come from and whether they really meant anything anymore, which was the kicker. They didn't, you know. I didn't need to be this dominant, frightfully muscly person who could get in the ring and do damage to someone. And, you know, it sounds ridiculous to put it that way, but I know that there was a part of me that thought that if I could become that hero figure, I would be able to fight my way out of fear and anxiety and all that stuff. And of course, I just fought myself into more and more and more of it. So the therapy flipped that. Because it changed my life so much, I trained to be a therapist. I practiced for 10 years. My therapy style was also very focused on metaphor and imagery and story. And for the sport, I went to art school, you know, so I'm very much interested in that side of things, and allowed me to come full circle. First, I wrote a book on it. And then because of writing the book, Ellie, my co-founder, messaged me and said she'd read the book and she wanted to see if I was interested in making a video game for mental health, and I was very much interested.
You've had like this crazy route, it seems, then, but you've obviously got the creative side already that was there. Like you said, you went to art school. Were you carrying on doing art while you were boxing as well, or had that sort of like cut off and then?
No, I'd done a similar thing with art as I did in boxing. I came out of art school, you know, with a great qualification, but had no confidence. I think I had one exhibition and then I didn't seek it anymore. I just decided that I wasn't good enough and went and worked in hospitality where I met a guy that I fancied and he took me to a boxing gym. And then that's how the things linked
and you're
up.
Like, oh, this is me now. Okay, cool. Yeah,
I'll do that instead. Here's the answer.
So had you been gaming already when you'd been approached to work on a game? Like, was that?
I mean, I come from a gaming family. When I say game, like my family is mainly a board game family, but you know, my sister is literally a board game fanatic. Just her birthday this weekend. We went and played Scythe Expeditions for the entire weekend. So games always been a big part of my life. I realised since the diagnosis of ADHD, which was relatively recent, so I was one of these women who slipped through the cracks, and I was functional enough, you know, to do that. I realised that I don't have relationships that aren't based on games. You know, I speak to my mum. We do a cryptic crossword. You know, we would never actually just phone up for a chat. I can't do that. But I can do a cryptic crossword with you, and that can be the basis of our relationship.
Okay, so you seem like you have a very similar family structure to me then. I was brought up by a gaming dad who's still now at the age of 62, I think he is now, 63 nearly. He still regularly plays his Xbox, he plays his Minecraft, his Destiny 2. I don't think it'll ever stop. One of my earliest memories, which I've recounted on the podcast before, is being sat on his knee while he got a new game and we sat and played through it, and it was like, I hold that as a treasure in the back of my mind, and I will do forever. Yeah. So that's really nice to hear that you come from a gaming family too.
It's part of the story, actually. I have a similar memory with my dad, except I was playing Rogue with him on MS-DOS. I don't know. How old are you?
I'm 32, just. So like my first console, well, I say console, was the Atari ST that my dad had, so we'd played on that.
So I think you would have been too young to play Rogue. I mean, it was very, very basic.
Yeah, I think DOS was the generation before.
But my dad and I would play Rogue until very late at night, and I would have to hide underneath the table if my mum was coming upstairs.
Oh, really?
And so with this wonderfully special thing that my dad was hiding me so that we could carry on playing Rogue.
That's absolutely adorable, and I absolutely love that. That's so nice. Yeah, so how did you go into making the game itself? Was that something you had looked into before? Was it you jumping in head first? Because I went to video game university, so I went to uni to study creating games. So did you do that yourself, or did you work with a team? Or
we'll work with a team, obviously. There's the two of us are co-founders, but neither of us have any game writing experience. I mean, we wanted to write, it's an interactive fiction game, right? So we thought we can test the theory by making an extremely basic chatbot version of it. And we made it with ManyChat, which is the software that Facebook uses to allow you to create automatic replies to people who message your Facebook group and stuff like that.
I see.
So simple. And we're like, if we can make a story that has, so for anyone who doesn't know what it's about, Betwixt is a choose your own adventure, fantasy choose your own adventure with theory and tools from psychology and therapy woven into the narrative. So as you travel through this dreamlike world, you get to develop self-awareness, self-compassion, and learn some emotion regulation skills along the way. The idea being that the story and the engagement came first, and that the therapeutic benefits and the skills you learn are almost a kind of happy byproduct. So that was our plan. We wanted to see if we could do that. We thought if we can make this work in ManyChat, then we'll know this is possible. So we made my co-founder worked out how to use ManyChat, and we created this thing, and I tested it with a load of friends who came around my house, and I fed them pizza.
The greatest bribe.
It was exactly all I needed. And then we sat around and talked about it. And it was fascinating because we had assumed before that our biggest challenge, we thought people will like the story bit, but we thought as soon as it starts to smack of therapy, they'll probably get turned off. Okay. And what we discovered in that test was actually that it was the other way around, that people were like, okay, fine, the story's cool. I mean, it was a totally different story from the one we have now, to be honest. But when they got to the therapy parts, which meant that they were typing their thoughts in, they were creating the world because they were now influencing it directly with what they were thinking and feeling, that was when they were locked in. So when we saw that happen, we're like, okay, there's potential here.
There's something here, yeah.
Now we just got to work out how to make it.
The gameplay itself, listeners, I have been playing through this, feel free to play. It's an interesting experience. It almost feels like you're wandering through a lucid dream. Now, I know it's supposed to be around the dream world itself. That's the interactions that you have on there. But as you're saying, then creating your own world, it feels like you are lucid dreaming, like you're growing and developing the world around you as you go through it, which is really, really nice. I absolutely think that is a brilliant idea to do from a game mechanic perspective. And you've also got sounds in there. You've got immersive soundscapes, which is so simple of a mechanic to put in there, but it has such a massive impact. People don't seem to realize how much sound impacts a game. It
was a huge difference. We added that in. We'd already started testing it without sound. And it was one of the things where we were like, maybe we'll do this. Yeah. But we'll see what people ask for. And so many people ask for sound. So I got a guy called Nick Andreas, he's actually a lawyer, but he's also a classically trained musician and a friend of mine. And he created both the soundscapes and the music. So there's immersive sound throughout the dreams. And then towards the end of the dream, almost always at the end, it turns into this beautiful music, this sort of ethereal music that he's created. And it just totally changed the experience.
Yeah, I can imagine the first time hearing the sound in it and what an impact it makes. Because I remember working on game projects at university, sorry. Obviously, I'm younger in my mind than I thought I was. The first time you put sound in a game, whether it's impact sounds or if you're working on a combat game or music or anything, going from playing something in pure silence, I don't know if you've come across the term game juice before, it's what people who work in games call it. It's player feedback, essentially. So when you interact with something, how does it interact back with you? Whether it's a sound, an animation, something shaking on screen.
Yeah.
As soon as you bring that in there, the impact is unmeasurable almost. It suddenly feels way more complete of a game. And I think that's why it impacts the choices that you make on the game. every little click that you do, it sort of feels more weighty almost.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting to hear, actually, because we're looking at adding things like haptics and some little animations when buttons are clicked. It's one of the things that we've got on a list to do. So we could, up the juice even further with that.
Oh, the more juice, the better. It's like an orange. Squeeze it all out. If you need anyone to test stuff, I'll by all means test it for you.
Oh, great.
And, like, have a play. I'd love to see how far it goes. One of the questions that I wanted to sort of touch on, and it's something that's played around a lot in the gaming sphere when it gets looked on negatively, and how games can either negatively or positively affect mental health. Do you think games in general, and this isn't speaking just in your game, because I know that obviously your game is to help mental health in a way. Do you think any other games can help anxiety, mental health, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I actually think any game could potentially help someone's mental health. The stuff around gaming being bad for mental health is part myth, I think. Yeah. And also just it's looking at the wrong people. So if you take literally anything that we can spend our time doing, if people do it for the wrong reasons, it will be bad for us. So if people are gaming too much because they want to escape the world, or because they don't like who they are and they want to be the character in the game, then the gaming is probably not going to be that good for them. Yeah. But if people are gaming for healthier reasons, and they are able to pick up and put the game down, and they're able to understand what their real world is and what role the game plays in it, there's no reason why it can't be a helpful thing. It's about story in the same way that novels are. And story is how we have learned from the beginning of time, of human time. Like, that's how the brain
around the campfires,
learns. Right, exactly. We are wired for that. We don't talk about it that often. We talk about it sort of casually, that we'll watch a film and it changes our life. We do that. We all understand that. A game can have exactly the same impact. And there are lots of games out there at the moment that are sort of toying with these ideas of, the bigger picture. We were at the Adventure X Games conference a couple of weeks ago, and there was somebody else there who was making a game called Cabernet, which is a vampire role player game based around the concept of alcoholism, and the blood was a metaphor for alcohol. Okay. And then there's We'll Always Have Paris, which is a game about Alzheimer's, about a husband whose wife has Alzheimer's. And I think I haven't played the game, but it's about playing to, you have to try and sort of have a nice day with your wife, sort of thing. So there are games out there that are really tackling massive topics. Yeah. And there's no reason why we can't see this as a path to improving people's mental health. It doesn't need to be demonized.
No, I don't think so at all. And I think even just in terms of storytelling, the way games have advanced, and obviously now we're in the era of huge AAA games that cost hundreds and hundreds of millions to make. Some of the storytelling in games, it blows me away how in depth they can be, because you can do so much more with the interactivity element in a story. Like when you're making choices, even in your game, when you're making choices of what you're going to say back to the voice that's speaking to you. And it's interesting to see where they're going to go next. And I know obviously we're moving into the world of VR, AR, that kind of thing. And I'm interested to see where they'll go next with choices in that kind of thing in a virtual environment. Have you played any VR games?
I love VR. I've got an Oculus. These days, I haven't got a boxing coach at the moment. I mainly do my fitness in Beat Saber.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Beat Saber is such a good game.
It's such a good game. Yeah. I love it. And my sister lives out of London, so it's a place where we can hang out together and have a workout together in a very competitive way, because of course my family is all about competition.
Yeah. Well, that's nice. Healthy competition.
Yeah, it's perfect. And we play also, speaking of Rogue, have you ever played Demio on VR?
I don't think I have, no.
It is a 3-dimensional, board game. It's a rogue-like game. So it's basically Rogue. It's just Rogue on steroids. And you can zoom in and be behind your warriors, and you're casting spells and stuff. Okay. Really recommend it. It's brilliant.
You said before we started recording that you're working a little bit more on more levels. You're working on expanding it. Is that anything you can talk about? Are you allowed to say anything?
I can actually. So in the base game there are 11 dreams, and it is a complete story. It has a beginning and an end. The most common thing that people say for how can we improve it is we want more. We want more dreams.
Just more of it.
Yeah, just more, which is great problem to have. And so what I'm currently doing is writing. We'll be testing this with 4 of them rather than writing the full 10 that I've got in mind. Writing some dreams that are going to go in between the dreams that are currently in there, almost doubling the amount of content of the story. Taking people, we're calling them deep pauses. They're like dreams that take people deeper into the topics addressed, because each dream has, the story in it, and then it also looks at a certain topic or a certain area of self-awareness. So one dream,
Yeah.
for example, will focus on values, another will focus on strengths and weaknesses. That sounds boring, but it's done in a more interesting way.
No,
And
that doesn't sound boring at all. Let me say.
the mini, well, that's coming from a wellness background. It's like, oh, strengths and weaknesses, but no, it's actually fun. So these mini dreams or these deep pauses are a way for us to give people a much deeper extra level of exploration, and also a whole new part of the world. I won't put any spoilers in about that, but you get to see different parts of the world.
Keep the spoilers out.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we're also working with a brilliant therapist and author at the moment called Ellen Clark. She's running some workshops for us at the moment, which are brilliant. We're calling them circles. They're for people to go deeper into the concepts. They're very creative. But she is also coming on board to potentially, as long as we can make it work financially, start writing a totally new story. Because what we want to happen with this eventually is for it to be a platform for lots of different stories of the type that Betwixt is. We're calling the genre mindful entertainment. So stories, interactive stories with some kind of additional benefit. And they'll mainly be mental health, certainly to begin with. But what this will allow us to do is to write lots of, the dream would be to have therapists with specializations pairing up with different writers and to have, a story on generalized anxiety or a story on codependency, and getting the goodness out of all these different therapists by pairing them with interactive fiction writers who can turn it into this playable experience.
So you've got a dream within a dream scenario. You're going a bit Inception here, aren't you? Okay.
Exactly, layering it in.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very cool. So when you start to bring different people in, is there anything that you're hoping that they'll like take back to reality from what they're learning in the game? Like, obviously you can't talk about the ones that are coming up, maybe the ones that you've got at the moment. Is there anything that you're hoping people will learn?
Yeah. The three things we've focused on are self-awareness, self-compassion, and emotion regulation. So throughout the game, you build up the blocks required to develop self-awareness. Self-awareness, for anyone who isn't sort of familiar with this use of the term, it doesn't mean, we're not talking about self-consciousness. It's not just about being aware that you are a being in the world. It's
not
about
an NPC. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's about, knowing what you value, what you aspire to, and crucially, how you come across to others, how you impact on the world. There's some brilliant research by a psychologist called Tasha Eurich, who looked at self-awareness and found that, I think this was the video you were talking about earlier on, found that if you measure self-awareness, not just in terms of people knowing their own stuff, but also knowing how they appear to the world, which is crucial, a crucial part of it, then what you find is around somewhere in the region of 95% of us believe we're self-aware, but the real percentage is closer to 10 or 15%, which means the vast majority of us are wandering around thinking, yeah, I know myself. And we're totally clueless.
Terrifying notion, though. I will say that's terrifying.
And it really makes you think. And the thing that when you look at that research as well, there are reams of studies showing the benefits of having self-awareness. Everything from being a successful person to being a connected and friendly person to being somebody who is liked and a good parent and a good learner, and all of these things, everything you possibly want can be improved seemingly by having a decent level of self-awareness, but none of us have it. So we wanted to help people start to ask the questions that they wouldn't usually ask to develop self-awareness. And then that rolls into self-compassion. Right? You can't have self-compassion unless you know who you are, and you can't have self-compassion unless you've faced your fears and faced your insecurities and the things you don't like about yourself, because you'll just keep blinding yourself to all of that information. So you start with self-awareness, and then that moves into self-compassion, which again, reams and reams and reams of studies showing how important that is for us. And the additional things, emotion regulation, it was just the ability to regulate your emotions, the ability to handle, fear and anger and even the positive emotions, how do we respond to those things? And we've got a couple of mechanics. I won't go into the details of them, but let's have a couple of mechanics of how to improve emotion regulation really woven into the game. One of them being self-distancing, which is to see yourself from a distance, which is basically what the game's all about, because you're imagining this version of you in this weird world, battling with these strange metaphorical things that, of course, your mind just links immediately to real life problems and real life obstacles.
Right. Okay. Like emotional regulation as a concept in itself, I suppose, is something that I just think everyone should be able to manage a little bit more.
I think there are some very basic things that you learn if you go to therapy or if you train as a therapist. Right at the beginning, you learn some very basic things which give you seemingly a superpower that you didn't realize you ever had. There's lots of different ways to learn those things, but we aren't taught them outside of the therapy context. So we aren't taught them in school, and we should be.
Yeah, we should be. And I mean, I think that's where games like Betwixt, for example, really give people a lot more power to learn a bit of regulation in day-to-day life by doing something, like, for example, gaming, which they would usually love anyway. Like, I've sort of come at this a bit of an unusual angle, I think, because I myself have just done first experience with therapy. Like, I've never done that before. Had myself a little mental quake and decided to have a chat with someone about that. It went very, very well. Like, I felt myself immediately being better over the course of the months after that. But I think now from stopping it, I've noticed myself creeping a little bit back towards it again. So I'm actually going to go back and do a few more courses, classes. I don't even know what to call it. Meetings, sessions. Thank you. Yeah. That word was just sort of a nebulous concept above my head that just was not coming down to me there. Like this game already, I'm noticing connections to what's been said.
There are studies to show that if when we're in a place of curiosity, we are more plastic. We learn faster. So as adults, we don't tend to learn that well. We have to be in quite specific neurological environments need to be sort of in place for us to be in a state of neuroplasticity to learn. And one of the best ways to achieve that is curiosity. There was a study with where they got people. They explained something that somebody had to learn either in a very literal, basic way or in this kind of otherworldly, magical way, and they found that just this magical, weird explanation of it that piqued people's curiosity meant that they learned the information, the unrelated information they were then fed, much better. So we wanted to create a world that was curious and weird and fantastical to put these therapy ideas into so that people could better learn them. And we also wanted to create something that people could use. And this goes for people who have never had therapy but are interested in it, or people who have never had therapy and aren't interested in it. Also people who are in the course of therapy and people who have finished therapy but can just pick up and put down whenever they want to re-engage with the ideas. Because just like learning a sport or a skill of any kind, you can't just go to therapy for a few sessions and expect to develop new habits. That's not how it works.
No, it takes a long time to develop habits, doesn't it? It's like anything, whether it's training a boxing gym or whether it's training your mind, you have to keep at something. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle it's almost like fitting in the self-help with the rest of their life. Like if you're so busy all of the time, and that's something like I definitely experienced. Like when you mentioned about burnout at the start of the episode, that was definitely what I was going through. Like whether it was trying to record, I have a creative job. Like my main job is a video editor. So when I'm not at home recording and editing my own videos, I'm doing it for other people. By the time I was coming home, I was like, oh God, I just don't want to touch another video, that kind of thing. So I think that was where the creep started to come from, essentially. How did you start making videos for your own TikTok? I'm curious about where TikTok fits into this. Were you on that beforehand, or was that sort of with the game?
I started TikTok something like February last year or something like that.
Oh, wow, okay.
We didn't have, up until that point, a social media channel. We've been making Betwixt for almost 4 years. At the first we were juggling our jobs, and it was all very much, part-time. We were lucky enough to come across enough grant money to pay ourselves about a year and a bit ago, so we could give up our day jobs. We'd done most of that without any social channels, apart from my personal ones. And we just picked TikTok. It was
it's obviously
drawn
worked.
Out of a hat. It was. And I quite enjoy doing those, actually. I mean, sometimes it's a bit of a time drain because I have to do all of it. I'd love it if we had a video editor or anyone that could help with that, but we don't. Yes, yes, but we need somebody who's free.
Yeah, I know, don't worry.
And I'm free. So yeah, it can be a bit of a time drain, but I do enjoy doing it, and it helps me to get it gets me to research new stuff as well, which leads to new ideas for the stories. So it's all good.
Oh wow! So you use it as like an extra creative medium to come up with new ideas.
That's amazing. Because especially when somebody will make a comment on one video or ask a question that I don't fully know the answer to, so I'll go and research it and I'll look at the studies that have been done on that particular thing, and I'm like, oh wow, interesting! I didn't know that. That can be the new TikTok, but also that really plays into here, and I could make a dream about that or whatever. So that whole thing just is one big kind of organic beast.
Do you remember posting your first TikTok and what it felt like?
Our first TikToks didn't have my face in them. I resisted it for ages.
Ah, okay.
I think I remember posting the first few that did have my face in them, was that we realised that we weren't going to get away with just having text on the screen.
Yeah, you need to see a face.
Yeah. I remember the first one that went big
Like, oh my God, what have I done?
It was really funny because I was telling, it was a story that I'd actually been told by my therapist many years ago when I'd had a sort of friendship breakup. One of my friends had disappeared out of my life. She sat there and she listened to me talk sort of stressing over, why, and I don't know what it is. And she was asking me a bit about the relationship. And I was like, we were always a bit sort of awkward with each other. I'm not actually sure we were that good friends, but still, been friends since we were at school, blah, blah, blah. And she sort of leant forward and she sort of locked me with her wise owl stare. And she said, there are 3 colours in this world. There are green, orange, and yellow. Green are the people who are your people. They click for you. They share your same values. They'll cheer you on no matter what you do. And then there's orange, who are people that are sort of the opposite of that. They're just not your people. And they'll be there, and that's fine. And they're not going to like you, value you, or respect you. And it's all right. That's fine. She said, but then there's yellow. They're the people who you don't know really what they are. In fact, you're kind of friends with them because maybe you've been friends with them for a while, or maybe they're a work colleague, or maybe there's some kind of benefit to having a friend like that you think, you think you have to. She was like, the only colour to get rid of is yellow. If the more you are comfortable with yourself, the more greens will show up. You'll be better and better with orange. But the only colour to get rid of is yellow. The people who would have you at a dinner party because they've got one seat to fill, or the people that you walk away from afterwards and think, I don't really enjoy that day. And we tell ourselves lies about these people all the time. I have to be friends with them because, or I should be friends with them because. And I think we could apply this to the work that we do as well. We can apply to basically anything. We constantly force ourselves to stay in things that aren't really right for us because we think we should. The effect is that it causes burnout. We spend so much energy changing our own shape to fit into a hole that we have decided we need to be in, be that a job or relationship or whatever, that we exhaust ourselves because it's emotionally takes its toll enormously. So the only colour to get rid of is yellow. So I made a TikTok about this, and it started with something like 10 years ago. One of my friends walked out of my life and I told this story and it went mad. It had like 1 million views. And before this, I was getting like hundreds max. Suddenly I had one that was like 1 million views, and the comments were hilarious. One woman said, maybe that person just left because, well, no offense, she said, but you don't seem like a very likable person. I was like, oh yeah, none taken.
No, it's all right.
So that was a bit of a shock to the system. I felt quite nervous while that was happening, but
I can
these
imagine.
days I'm a bit more savvy and I'm a bit more comfortable when that happens.
That's such a hard thing to do, walking away from people that are that grade of colour. I guess I think it's a lot of people are scared to be who they want to be or who they are.
That's what the story is really about. It's about being green. And to use the colour metaphor, it's about being green for yourself. And when you are just true to yourself, when you do decide to speak your mind, not to the point where you're saying rude things all the time to people, but to be, to not fake it, to not try and fit in, but to truly be yourself. That doesn't mean you say to somebody, hey, I've decided you're yellow, you're out of my life. It's not about ghosting people or anything. When you start being more authentic over time, the yellows will disappear and the greens will appear, and you'll recognize an orange more quickly because you are just not prepared to put up with the crap that you would have been putting up with before.
And I think a lot of people do struggle in a time like now when everyone's so much more connected because of social media, but also a lot more separated because of social media, if you know what I mean. Like I don't find myself with as much time to go out to see friends in real life as I would like to, but it's so easy to just message them on Twitter or TikTok or WhatsApp, that kind of thing. Whether it's like different amounts of group chats that you end up getting put into with like different groups of friends, but then organizing times when you can see all those people is something that a lot of people I think find very, very difficult. One of the things that's actually helped a lot of us, and I think this was actually during lockdown saying that, was how much gaming saved a lot of people during lockdown. Now, not the most relaxed game, I will say, but Call of Duty Warzone, a first-person shooter, was what a lot of me and my friends congregated on. We got terrifyingly good at the game very, very quickly because there was nothing else to do except sit inside and sit in front of the TV. But the social aspect of it was so nice to be able to meet people every day and have a laugh and have proximity chat with people, that kind of thing. Some of these friends I didn't know in real life, by the way. Like, shout out to Effie and Paul. They invited me to a barbecue. Turned out they lived down the road.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, they lived in the next town. They were a friend of another podcast that turned up outside of my work one time, which was very scary because they just put a picture on my public Twitter of them stood outside my workplace. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening? Yeah, ended up going to a barbecue. They're now very, very good friends. And now we play D&D quite often. We've gone like
great.
full nerd, like board game. It's so much fun. Is that something you've ever tried? Have you ever done D&D?
I haven't played it. I keep meaning to.
Oh, you
but
should. It's so much fun.
I need to. I actually bought all of the books for my sister
Oh, really?
for her 40th.
Wow.
And we haven't got round to. We said we were going to like book a long weekend away and go away and sort of like learn it, but we haven't got around to it. We were playing Hero Quest at the weekend though.
Oh my God. Holy shit. So my dad had the first edition of that when I was a kid, and we did used to play. I've still got it in the loft somewhere.
Oh my God. My sister's boyfriend is the ultimate geek.
Okay.
He's like literally, I'm going to be the dungeon master. So, hamming it up and absolutely loving like all the backstory and everything. So I haven't played D&D yet. But have you seen there are some amazing people doing D&D therapy stuff. There's a lot of, I've heard a lot of stuff around sort of counselor / D&D dungeon masters, people who create D&D groups for kids with learning disabilities or autism or social difficulties. And then they get to role play. It's much like we're trying to do with Betwixt. They get to role play the issues they experience in real life through the game, which gives them a safe way of learning things. So somebody was telling me just the other day about an example of a guy that was doing this, and one of the kids in his group had this issue where he was autistic and he was just too trusting. He would just open up to people too much. He would just expect everybody to be a friend, and it was dangerous for him. The D&D, what are they called? Dungeon masters?
Yeah, DMs.
Yeah. What the DM did was, create a situation where there was kind of a monster in an alleyway or something, and when the kid sort of tried to talk to the monster fought the character, and so it was a way for this kid to recognize the dangers in that sort of situation, but without having to actually be mugged or robbed or anything like that could happen in real life.
Wow, that's so cool. I've never heard anyone doing that kind of thing.
I've come across it a few times. So there was a Tim Ferriss episode around it, I think once I caught like a few years ago. It's definitely a thing that people recognize, that role play is just, role play is a part of therapy anyway. There are entire sort of styles of therapy, which are basically just role-playing sessions.
Okay. Is there any that like come to mind that you can tell me about?
To say everything is just a role-playing session is a massive oversimplification, and people will kill me for it. But what I was thinking of is Gestalt. So Gestalt, there's something called Gestalt chair, where you imagine a part of your personality or somebody from your life sitting on the chair, and you role-play conversations with them. The spatial part of it is important. You don't just have the conversation in your head. You actually have the chair sitting there, and you imagine the part of your personality or the person sitting on that chair, and you start to have conversations. There's a style of therapy called internal family systems, which is amazing. It's all about parts, how we're made up. We aren't just one person or one personality. We're made up of different parts, and each part has its own set of resources and skills and thoughts and emotions. And we know this, right? Because we can go into different versions of ourselves depending on where we are and what's demanded of us in certain situations. But we also have parts that are problematic. So the part that comfort eats, the part that has anxiety, the part that, this is what my book's about essentially as well. And in therapy, people come to the sessions saying, I want to get rid of this part. We all do that before we know what's up. We say, there's a part of me that is just shouting at my partner, or there's this part of me that feels too anxious before I go into fight. And that was for me. Part of me is just pathetic and weak and scared, and I want to get rid of that part so I can be the person I'm supposed to be.
Okay.
Which is not only impossible, but also really unhealthy, because the more we resist or try to fight off these parts of the self that we don't like, the bigger and more frightening and more persistent they become, because you can't get rid of a part of the person. A bit like, when people are, when amputees have phantom limb pain.
Yeah.
Trying to deny or get rid of a part is like that. It will still retain the ability to cause you pain. What therapy is about is reintegrating these parts, changing the way we see these parts of ourselves, changing the way we see the part that feels anxious, understanding the intentions behind those behaviors. And internal family systems, the idea is to get these parts communicating with each other. So you almost have this whole sort of psychodrama acting out with these parts of the personality, which are sometimes metaphorical, sometimes little versions of yourself. And the more you get them talking, the more you realize that there is something beyond it, below it, which is basically kind of your sense of who you really are. And it's always there. Like, parts pop up in different situations. They're situation specific, but who you really are at the core is always there. And what Richard Schwartz is the developer of IFS. And he talks about, he started to notice when people were getting beyond these layers of parts, when they would start to use one of, I think, 9 words that all begin with the letter C. There are things like compassion, curiosity, creativity, connection, calm. And when people start to use those words, they have allowed themselves to sink beyond this sort of psychodrama of coping mechanisms that are battling and warring, and into who they really are. And they become much more grounded, much more comfortable, and they're able to see clearly and make their own decisions. The reason I started saying all of that was, in Betwixt there's a monster, and you only, at the beginning, you could just start to see this monster out of the corner of your eye. Every now and then it's this fleeting shadow that moves in the distance. But ultimately you need to get to the phase where you confront this monster. You're going to battle it, perhaps. And I'm not, again, I can't give any spoilers, but it's a way of playing out this sort of experience we usually have of knowing something isn't quite right, not really knowing what it is, and then stumbling across what it is and being able to put a name to it and fighting it with everything we can because we want to get rid of this part. And then what happens beyond that, which is the bit I can't spoil because it's the rest of the story, but it's the rest of it's kind of basically the therapy journey. So yeah, that's what it's all about. That was a huge ramble. Good luck editing it.
It was amazing. To be honest, I was about to ask you for like one profound message that people will feel when they finish the game, and you pretty much just answered that before I could even ask the question, which was wonderful. So I'll just add in that question and put that before what you just said.
Yeah. So actually, I'll tell you the story I was going to tell you. So
Sure.
After this whole burnout and, being forced into therapy and then going into the type of therapy that got me to face my fears, reassess my values, actually look at what was genuinely meaningful, important to me in my life, what ultimately happened was I befriended my monster. So before therapy, I felt like there was this anxiety monster that was chasing me around. It was looming just behind me the entire time, ready to pounce. And it felt like it was making me weak and pathetic. But after therapy, I had recontextualized it and I'd realized that this thing was not my enemy. It's just a part of who I am. I can't put it into words really because it's going to sound lame compared to what it really was. This was a real epiphany to understand that this was just it was all linked back to my dad and his competitiveness and how I felt like I needed to be this winner for him because he loved competition and gaming and poker and everything so much that I took on this role of needing to be this winner. And my fear of failure and the anxiety that came from it was therefore just basically a 5-year-old me that was running a race and impressing my dad. And it
was just in the back of your head still running that race.
Yeah, because I'd lost touch with what it really was. It turned into this horrible, shadowy monster rather than me seeing it for what it really was, which was actually quite a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And my dad died actually in the middle of this whole therapy process. My dad died very unexpectedly of a heart attack. So that didn't help the burnout much.
I can imagine, yeah.
And also, made the therapy stuff, even weightier because it was also about, reconnecting with him. I was competing for the national title in boxing after this journey. And up until that point, I'd just been getting better over time. This was the point when I really knew that something was different. And on that day, we were warming up, right? And all around me, fighters were sitting with towels draped over their anxious faces, each one waiting for their moment, totally alone. And normally at this stage, I would be focusing completely on my fears and what someone had told me about my opponent. On this occasion, somebody had very helpfully told me that girl can bang, which was a weird way of putting that she could hit hard. And I would be thinking about that. But instead, I was present. In the warm-up, I was listening to the song of the skipping rope as it whistled past my ears. I was just absorbed in this task. And as I walked out to fight, like one purposeful step after another, I felt weirdly at peace. It was like the crowd had been hushed by this crisp layer of freshly fallen snow. And the stillness in my mind was interrupted solely by this curious little voice that says, "I've got this." Now, this wasn't like that sort of arrogant confidence, overconfidence that people have, like, I'm going to win. It was actually more of just a gentle understanding that if I did win, I deserved the victory. And when I got into the ring, because I wasn't afraid of losing, because I was bringing my monster into the ring with me to cheer me on and fight with me, the fight went well. I got into a flow state. I remember, just feeling like my hands were doing the work for me. My feet knew where to go without me having to direct them. The shots were just throwing and they were landing. But the real difference between that fight and any other came at the end. Because when my hand was raised in victory, I felt this surge of just alien emotion. I always say I'm not sure whether it was pride or happiness or just a good old-fashioned sense of achievement, but it was new because up until that point, whenever my hand had been raised in victory, even on the 2 world titles I'd won before that point, I had hung my head and averted my eyes. Because up until that stage, what I'd felt upon winning was shame, because I had never really truly felt that I deserved the victory. I was always ready to write off the achievement as fluke or chance, just like another lucky day when I got away with it. But on this day, I owned the victory. And it changed everything. It was after that fight, on the drive home from that fight, that I knew I didn't need to box anymore. I had one fight after that and I quit because I
Really?
just
And you were
didn't
done?
need it.
Wow.
I didn't need it. And so my book is about how I got from the anxiety monster to that point. And again, it's a creative thing. I ask people to draw their monster at the beginning because I know from therapy that when you get people to in touch with the part of themselves that they don't like and you ask them what it looks like, they'll be like a blob of slime or a cloud or a puddle or just something amorphous and not nice because they want to delete this thing or kill it. But as you take them through the therapy and as they start to learn to love themselves, even the bits that cause these problems, because that's what it's all about, you can't change it by resisting the part. But when you accept the part and all of its problems, then actually the problems tend to change. And when you take people through this journey, they stop seeing these parts as these disgusting blobs of slime and they start personifying them or seeing them as, like I did, as this cute child version of me that was just totally besotted with her father, who was an amazing man and had then died. And, my fear was suddenly a completely different thing when I thought about it that way. So the book is about taking people on that journey, starting with what's the part and how do you imagine it now, and then taking them through this sort of leveling of awareness around it until they can befriend it the way that
sounds like an
I did.
amazing book. I think I'll be picking it up for myself. Thank you. If I buy it directly from you, will you sign it for me?
Absolutely.
Will you put two has from has? Because that will make me very happy.
Yeah.
Amazing. Wow. Yeah, that sounds incredible. Like I felt a lot of connection to that then when you're saying about the moment when someone holds your hands up and you should feel accomplished and you don't. That's a very familiar thing to me, which is rang very true. That was weird. I was in a bit of a moment then when you were talking. I felt like I was in a flow state just listening to the story, to be honest. You're a very good storyteller, so I'm very glad that you're doing a narrative game.
Thank you. Yeah, me too.
You've hit your stride. You really have.
If anybody wants to write a book and get published, the most important thing they can do is get an agent. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do. You have to get an agent. Got a friend who wrote a book, got published, didn't get the agent, unwittingly signed away the TV rights, and then Channel 4 wanted to make a TV program about her book. But if they'd done it, she would have got absolutely none of the royalties, so she had to say no. As a result of having an agent, we had two publishers in a bidding war, which meant I got a bigger advance. So anybody who wants to write a book, get an agent.
I've just sent off my manuscript for the first edit from my editor, who is the wonderful narrative editor from Netflix's Dark. Somehow managed to get her as my first book editor, which has kind of blown my mind a little bit. So yeah, because it's a bit of a sci-fi horror thing in that kind of vein.
So it's a novel?
Yeah, it's a novel, yeah. The first of a trilogy. These three novels sort of take place concurrently. So I've been working on the first two at the same time, sort of tying bits together, which I then realized, oh shit, they resolve in a third one. So now I'm adding a third one to it, which I didn't think I was going to do. But I've just signed Agatha on to do those as well, which is really great.
Fantasy and sci-fi, these are my favourite genres. So I will absolutely read this series when it comes out.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I'll put two has from has in yours.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Oh my God. Agents take like a 15% cut or 20. It's all standard. Like they don't take different cuts. And lots of people don't take the agent because of that cut. And I'm like, it's worth its weight in gold. They'll put the lawyers onto it to have there was a huge battle with my publisher about whether we would do an audiobook. And it went on for months. Right. And then eventually they put the audiobook in there, which I read, which was so hard.
Oh, you did it yourself?
Yeah.
That's great. But you've got a great reading voice, though. Like, I think it's so important for someone who's writing their own book, like maybe something that's more personal, like the book that you have written, to be in the author's own voice. I think it comes across much more impactful, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it was, but I was very bad. I'm still bad reading out loud. And really? You know what's really funny? This is a monster thing for me. So what we tend to do when we have like a monster moment in our life is we then just avoid the situation, like the plague. And I had a horrible... So I'm probably dyslexic, never diagnosed, but ADHD as well. I had a terrible reading age when I was younger. And one time in secondary school, I was asked to read out loud. I remember it was A View from the Bridge by Arthur Miller, and I read.
Stuck with you then.
Yeah. I was reading about a patsy, but I mispronounced it and called this person a pasty. Funny, right. And obviously the class found it very funny. And laughed at me, and I've never forgotten it. And like literally from that point forward, I was like, well, I'm never reading out loud again. Even reading Trivial Pursuit questions, I would like pre-read them to make sure that I wasn't going to fuck it up.
Yeah.
And so when I had to do this thing, I went in there and I was like, let's just see how it goes. And the first hour was I was so bad. It was constant, like retake. And by the end of it, I'd got all right. but it was exhausting and terrifying. I should have taken some of my own advice. I mean, I should have looked into this at some point, knowing it was coming up, done some therapy around it, had a bit of a practice, but no, I just avoided it and hoped it was going to be all right on the day, and it was so hard.
I mean, that's good to know that therapists also push things to the back and just be like, I'll deal with it another time. That's good to know. It's, okay. I think that does bring us to the end of the episode, doesn't it? Very, very nice. And I'm glad we had this extra bit of chat. So,
God, what if it doesn't save?
Then it's just been a wonderful moment. It's just been a fleeting moment in time of a nice conversation. And we'll come back again. And next time I'm in London, I'll give you a shout. Hopefully it won't be rainy and we'll go grab coffee somewhere or something you can recommend somewhere.
Yeah, that would be good.
Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Haz, for joining me. If you are listening on any podcast player, make sure to leave a review. Let us know what you thought. Check out Hazel's books. Check out the game Betwixt, obviously, because it's going to be very, very helpful for everything. And it's just an all-round great experience. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been an absolutely wonderful chat.
If you ever want to do another one, you know where I am. Please feel free to edit the hell out of me because I am a rambler. The game can be found. It's a mobile game, so you can find it on the App Stores, Google Play and iOS App Stores. Search Betwixt. That's Betwixt. As in Betwixt in between, on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. I think the app. Book. My book is The Solution. Actually, got a copy of it here. Just have a copy of it here.
What's this? I've got over here.
Yeah. You can find us on Discord too.
And you're on Discord as well. Amazing. The Game Hub, the Game Central, the game social media that everybody needs. Everyone was jumping on Zoom during the pandemic, and we were all just like, we're just on Discord, just having a great time, just playing Warzone. It's a much better place to be. So yes, we'll see you next week. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.